Hello everybody, my name is Ben, and welcome to Comic Book Breakdown's 2024 Free Comic Book Day edition episode. Yesterday was Free Comic Book Day. I did pretty much nothing to document it for the most part, but I did go around to a couple of local comic stores here in the Orlando area with one of my best friends, Efren, and I just spent the day hanging out with my friend, buying and looking at comic books, having a good time. So I didn't document anything throughout the day, but I did think it would be a little fun to kind of review what came out, because I picked up a decent amount of free comics, and then I bought a decent amount of stuff, because of course I did, and shouldn't have, but did. But yeah, it's early morning the next day. You can tell by my early morning voice. Hello, everybody. And I just kind of wanted to run through some of the books really quickly. So, of course, I started with Free Comic Book Day, Energon Universe. It's solid. I wish I had picked up a couple more copies of it, because it's clearly going to be a necessary story point for pretty much all of the Skybound books. Void Rivals, Transformers, and then I'm considering all of the G.I. Joe miniseries just a part of the lead up to whatever G.I. Joe thing Skybound ends up doing. So yeah, I do kind of wish, in traveling around, that I had picked up more than one copy, because I need it to go in more than one collection. So I'm kind of hoping, moving forward over the next couple of days, I can visit a couple more shops, and they may have leftover copies. Like, I always try to be very conscious on Free Comic Book Day. For those of you who don't know, comic book stores have to pay for the Free Comic Book Day copies that they give away on Free Comic Book Day. My understanding is they don't cost a lot of money, like they are not priced like a regular comic book, but stores still have to order them, they still have to pay for them, and then they give them away for nothing. The idea being that you go into the store and you're probably going to hopefully spend a little bit of money. And believe me, I'm always willing to spend a little bit of money, but knowing that these are books that the store paid for, and that there are other people out there who want them, you do see a lot more kids, I feel like, on Free Comic Book Day than you typically see on the rest of the year. And then a lot of people who come in are people who are just like, well, I like comics, but I can't afford them. I'll just get the free ones when I can. Which I get it. I've been super broke before. I'm generally super broke, and comic books are the one thing that, like, I let myself get for the most part. But I try not to grab doubles or triples or collector's copies or whatever the hell. I try to keep it down to, here are the books I want, let me get a copy of each so I can read each. But now that Free Comic Book Day is over, if I'm able to get my hands on a couple copies of the Energon Universe, I absolutely will be. It was a good read. It makes sense with everything else that's been going on in the various Skybound comics. Yeah, this was good. I'm going to have to get more. I also got Street Fighter versus Final Fight. Udon always puts out some kind of Capcom-related thing pretty much every Free Comic Book Day, if I remember correctly. Udon's Capcom output does vary generally in storytelling capabilities. They always look good. Artistically, Udon is fantastic. Writing-wise, they're always a little bit... but I do overall love the stuff. I think the Capcom... like, the universe of Capcom titles could be really interesting. I love how they're all interconnected. I like how they all play with each other. The Jeddah one-shot that they released earlier this year sets up a really cool, like, Darkstalker Street Fighter, like, team-up kind of thing. And this basically really solidly introduces the Final Fight characters and actually sets up a Final Fight miniseries that's going to be dropping in July of 2024, which I did not know was coming, because Udon doesn't advertise anything, like, online. Like, I follow Udon on social media, and I don't know that a thing's coming out until the thing has been released, almost. The only thing I see them advertise is their swimsuit edition, which, I mean, good for them, but yeah, please, Udon, please, tell me when your stuff's coming out. Do interviews, do posts, do something. Like, I want to know. I like your stuff. I want to buy it. Of course, from Marvel, I had to get Bloodhunt issue 1. I won't lie, I largely got this because it promos and sets up Gail Simone's The Uncanny X-Men volume coming out in, I think it's next month or the month after. I'm a little burnt out after the last round of X-Men titles that Marvel's been doing. So I do think I might hold off on getting everything all at once. But I will be getting Gail Simone's Uncanny because I love Gail Simone's writing, and Uncanny is my favorite personal X title. So I'm glad she's going to be on it. I do want to get Jed McKay's X-Men as well, but one thing at a time. The main story for Bloodhunt is a fine setup leading into the actual first issue. I read the first issue last night, actually, and I really enjoyed that as well. Again, this is another comic that I was like, oh, crap. I wish I'd known that I was going to enjoy this as much, because I'd really like a copy. One for my Bloodhunt collection, and then one for the Uncanny X-Men collection. So if I can find it again, I will. Of course, I picked up DC's Absolute Power. This sets up some of the status quo for their big summer event that they've got going on. DC's kind of had these, like, through line for their last couple of events that are leading to Absolute Power. I don't know if Absolute Power is the end of that line or not. But it's basically Amanda Waller making the ultimate play to, like, get control of the superheroes of the DC Universe. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really care. While I do think Amanda Waller is a fascinating, interesting character, I don't care at all. She's been one of the main antagonists over in Titans for the past couple of months, and every time I see her, I just go, oh, God. Like, I get it at this point. Like, it's just so... She has one thing that she does, and she just harps on it every time. I don't even buy a lot of DC comics, right? I don't, like... My DC collection compared to my Marvel collection is such a slim sliver. It's such a slim thing, and I'm so sick of Amanda Waller being Amanda Waller at this point. It's not interesting. It's not cool. It's just, again, for what feels like the 45th time. She's basically teaming up with, like, evil Batman to create something that's going to, like, drain the superpowers of the DC Universe. It is being written by Mark Waid and then drawn by Dan Mora, which is quite the pedigree. I think Dan Mora is one of the best artists working in the industry at the moment. And, of course, Mark Waid's a writing legend. He knows absolutely what he's doing. So will I get the actual event when it comes out? At the moment, I'm highly skeptical. But I wanted to check this out to kind of get a flavor test for it, see if I was going to be interested. And this didn't really do much for me. I got the Spider-Man Ultimate Universe one-shot, mostly because, and it's not advertised on the front at all, it has a small couple-page thing at the very end dealing with Dylan Brock. And I'm going to show some spoilers here. Dylan Brock, and it sets up some of the things that are going to be going on in Venom War later this year. That said, the Ultimate Universe bit of storytelling was really cool and really good. I really like Hickman's writing for Captain America. I'm a little sad that he didn't get to write him more during his Avengers run. Hickman puts a little bit more of an edge to Captain America than you typically see in the main 616 comics, which I suppose is appropriate for the Ultimate Universe Captain America. The Spider-Man story, I really didn't like pretty much at all. I did not like... I normally like Ryan Stegman's artwork. I've got a couple posters by him. I have a whole bunch of comics that he's drawn. I did not like the artwork in this particular comic. I didn't like the story. I didn't think it was funny. I didn't think it was entertaining. It's being used to set up the... Is it on the back? Yeah, it is. I thought so. It's being used to set up the upcoming return of the Green Goblin over in the Amazing Spider-Man comics. That did absolutely nothing for me. The Venom teaser... I don't know how I feel about it. Spoiler alert real quick. They introduced the idea that there's, like, old man Dylan Brock comes back from the future to help guide his younger self through the upcoming Venom War or something along those lines, which is just such a... And, like, the character's very clearly, like, inspired by Cable from the X-Men books. So there's a part of me that's like, oh, that's kind of cute. And there's also a part of me that's like, that's so dumb. It's so comic book, which is why I like it. We'll see. That's going in my Venom collection, as weird as it is. But, yeah, and again, Marvel does, like, a Venom teaser pretty much every year. I'm surprised that they didn't do more of a thing with, like, Spider-Man and then Venom and then do something else with Ultimate Universe, but they did what they did. I don't know. I did pick up Conan, Battle of the Black Stone. It camera doesn't capture the gorgeousness of this cover pretty much at all. I don't normally buy Conan comics. I've never read any of the Conan books. What few Conan comics that I do own were the Marvel ones written by Jason Aaron, because I think he nails what I want out of a Conan story. I do know that author Jim Zub, who is writing the current Conan stuff, has written a lot of Conan for Marvel before. He wrote a couple. I think he wrote the Savage Sword of Conan. I believe he wrote the first volume of Savage Avengers, if I remember right, which featured Conan in the Marvel Universe. But the main reason that I picked this up is because it's supposed to set up kind of like a Howard verse, using all of E. Howard's characters that he wrote in the various books that he wrote, which apparently were like all of a shared universe anyways. And it gives you this introduction to who all the characters are, and it doesn't quite start to tell you yet how they're going to relate to each other, because I would argue it shouldn't. But the thing that really got me was apparently some of Conan's mythology ties back into, or like teams up with, some of H.P. Lovecraft's like Cthulhu mythos stuff. And I just finished listening to a podcast recently called the H.P. Lovecraft Investigations, if I remember correctly. That's what it was called. And I really liked it. It had so many ideas and concepts that I already like and find fascinating in storytelling. It was like the podcast was set up where it was a true crime podcast investigating the disappearance of somebody, and then the more they investigated that person and how they disappeared and why they disappeared, they found this like global conspiracy that goes back to the dawn of time and touches a whole bunch of ancient religions and modern forms of worship and unseeing unknown gods, and people thinking, oh, this is a god, it's a demon, it's an angel, it's a being from another dimension, maybe it's all of those things, maybe it's none of those things. And I was so captivated by the storytelling. And knowing that this Conan story is kind of touching upon some of those ideas and concepts, but again, telling a story over centuries, if not thousands of years, using a variety of different characters, I was just like, oh no, that's kind of exactly what I want. Oh my god. So I don't know that I'm going to buy any more of the Conan stuff. I may just get the Battle of the Black Stone stuff if I can afford it, because like I said, I thought this was really cool. The setup was interesting. I do admit I don't like Jim Zub's Conan compared to like Jason Aaron's Conan. That's something that it could just be, it might take me a little time to warm up to his interpretation of the character. We'll see, maybe. But yeah, that one was pretty good. We do have Hellboy, also featuring Stranger Things. I won't lie, I did not read this one yesterday because I know that I don't really like Hellboy. It was written by Mike Mignola with art by Mike Loslow. And again, for me, the appeal for Hellboy is that it's Mike Mignola doing Mike Mignola's best stuff. And when he has another artist paired with him, I really don't care. It kind of doesn't matter who that artist is. So I didn't read this one yesterday at all. I was like, we'll get to it if we get to it. Hellboy's not really my thing. I actually picked up, hello, Co. I actually picked up this comic for a friend of mine who didn't have as much free time as I did to hit up as many stores as I did. So he'd sent me a list of like, here's things you could pick up for me if you get a chance and if you see them. And I grabbed this for him. So, and then when I messaged him about it, he was like, oh, I actually found it at another store, sorry. And I was like, that's fine. I'm not worried about it. So I've ended up with it. And then I also got the Free Comic Book Day of Dying Inside, which I didn't know what this was. I've never heard of it. I've heard of Vault, but I don't know anything else about them. But the main reason I got it was because it's by Fall Out Boy's Pete Wentz. She could barely make it out on my camera. But I didn't know Pete Wentz had an interest in making comic books. I do like Fall Out Boy. Going with my buddy Ephraim around, like when I pointed it out to him and I was like, what the fuck is this? We saw Fall Out Boy when they came to Universal Studios one time for Mardi Gras, and Pete Wentz had the absolute least amount of stage presence we've ever seen on anybody in a concert. Like, he just stood there He didn't do anything. He wasn't jumping around or like he didn't do almost anything when he was on stage. And maybe he can't. I don't know, but neither one of us were impressed by like his performance. Like he vocally he was fine when he didn't have to do vocals and he was playing guitar and that stuff. Like that stuff was fine. We were just both like, wow, he's not like doing anything. Like you go to a concert, you expect a show. This guy's not doing a show at all. And it's just something that always stuck with us. It has not affected my interest in Fall Out Boy at all. I think Fall Out Boy's great. But yeah, I picked this up out of curiosity just because I had no idea what this was supposed to be. And I do have mixed feelings on it. The story features this lead character who's like depressed and tired of life, so she tries to kill herself. I suppose trigger warning for attempts at suicide. It's very much written like a comedy. The setup for it is very comedic. And then the character like tapes a knife to her bedroom door and then like runs herself onto it, and then she falls backwards and she's fine. She did bleed, but she did have the remainder of a wound, but then it immediately like healed up. Like it feels like teenage Wolverine being an angsty teenage girl and then discovering that, oh, she has a healing factor. What do I do now? I can't kill myself. The setup, I won't lie, it was very like pretentious artsy stuff. Like even as someone who suffers from depression and even as someone who has had suicidal thoughts before, very rarely, but it's happened, I'm not going to lie, I do still think it's pretentious for anybody who is like 21 and under to be like, man, life is so hard that I just cannot with it anymore. Like, man, you're 16. You haven't even experienced anything. There's so much of life left to live. There's so many ways things get better. And again, I understand that when the depression kicks in, there's no negotiating with it. Everything sucks. I've been struggling with it myself at the moment, but I won't lie. This still came off as like a pretentious artsy kind of thing, where it's somebody being like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if this person was so like upset at life that they were like, I'm gonna die?" And it yeah, that happens. But this is treated in such a comical way that it doesn't feel like there's any, I don't know, like there's any respect to it, and maybe there shouldn't be, I guess. But I don't know. I've got, like I said, I ended up coming out of this with a lot of mixed feelings regarding it. I almost want to keep getting more just to see what the hell this is supposed to be. Other than the Howard vs. Conan stuff, this is probably the single most intriguing issue that I read. I don't really like the character. I don't remember her name. You can see how much it made an impact on me. But yeah, I don't really like this character, but she's in an interesting situation in terms of what's going on with her and where does she go from here. This sigil thingamajig would imply that it's some kind of magic, but I don't know otherwise. Artistically, it looked good. Artwork by Hannah Klein and Lisa Sturl. I do think artistically it looks really good. Storytelling wise, it's definitely a little bit weird. And maybe, like I said, maybe they did the comedy to offset the seriousness of the attempt at self-harm. Maybe they are just trying to not treat self-harm like it's this like super serious thing and it's something stupid that teenagers do, which also isn't true. I don't know. Obviously, self-harm's a very delicate topic, and I think you have to be very specific with how you handle it. And this isn't how I would have handled it, but that's part of why I'm interested in it. So I don't really know. And then one of the shops that I visited, The Collective, had an artist alley set up, and they only had like 3 or 4 artists there, but it was still cool. Like most comic book stores on Free Comic Book Day, they've got the free comics. They'll probably have some sales going on, but I liked seeing artists there pitching their wares, open for commission, willing to chat with people. I wish one of the things I'd want to do at some point with Breakdown is just kind of a matter of forcing myself to do it and then being okay with doing it, is like going to the stores with a camera and being like, hey, can I talk to the artists? Or like asking the artists if they would like to be interviewed or promote themselves or something like that. But one of the books, there was one table, they had one like free promo comic, and it's this book, Vibrance Prologue by Christopher Zeig and Wesley Thomas. Their website is comicvibrance.com, and then they also have their email, comicvibrance@gmail.com. Camera, will you work at all? Maybe not. You can almost make it out. And I read through this, which is a little bit of a weird thing to say, because on the one hand, all of the comic stories here on this opening page, you can see there's a couple dialogue balloons here of people that I don't know who they are or what they're doing. And then let me double check, because I don't want to say the statement if it's not true. Okay, it wouldn't be true. There's only 2 other lines of dialogue in the whole comic. Why am I here? Why am I here? Then a giant hand comes up through the ground. This did absolutely nothing for me, unfortunately. I'm not going to lie, I didn't read that big page of text that it opened with, because you're making a comic book. I shouldn't have to read a big page of text and background explaining what's going on in your comic book. That's bad storytelling. If it's not going to be in the comic, then why are you putting it there? The X-Men did this a little bit during the Krakoan era, because Jonathan Hickman did so much world building and set up so much background stuff that you just couldn't cover in a compelling way, because it's all set pieces. It's like, and Charles Xavier formed a corporation that is selling Krakoan flowers that produce medicine. Which, how do you do that on a comic book panel? Do you just have a shot of Charles Xavier being like, oh, I've created a Krakoan flower and it solves all medical problems? That's also not interesting. But if you're going to put all of your lore on a single page and then give me, and admittedly, I think it's 8 to 10 pages. Yeah, it's like 7 pages of actual comic book. If you're going to put all your lore on one page and then give me 7 pages of what is essentially a bunch of people getting Thanos dusted and then a giant hand coming up out of the ground, none of this seems to connect. None of this seems to make sense. From a reader's perspective, there wasn't anything for me to read. I don't have any characters to latch onto. I understand it, like, intellectually, that you want me to care about this character. The why am I still here? Oh, you want me to care about who this person is and the things that they've lost. I don't care at all, unfortunately. I will probably go back and read that long data page, but if I wanted to read a book, if you wanted to write a book, you should just have written a book. And if you wanted to make a comic book, then you should be drawing those things and showing me those things. And if you go, well, those things aren't what we wanted this comic to be about, then why are they here? This is a really good example of not knowing what you want to tell anybody and just kind of wanting to make a comic. I know, I've been there. But yeah, this, from a storytelling perspective, this did pretty much nothing for me. Artistically, like, compared to a modern comic from, like, Marvel or DC, it is rough looking. But I mean, overall, this isn't bad. They use some interesting camera angles. They use some interesting page breaks. The coloring is actually pretty good, again, for an independent comic just made by a couple of people. That works really well. I do think that there's a lot of promise here artistically, but yeah, from a story perspective, that wasn't a whole lot of anything for me. And then otherwise, I did pick up, like I said, I picked up a couple of new books that I hadn't bought Friday when I made my first comic pickup for the week because I got paid again. And then I picked up a couple of dollar books from some other stores. I got one issue of Marvel Team Up featuring Namor and Captain America, because I did put together a Namor collection a couple of years ago. And that book ends, Namor sacrifices himself to stop Onslaught during the Onslaught crossover. He appears in the Heroes Reborn event world, and then in theory, Heroes Reborn Namor leaves that world and travels back to 616 Earth during the Heroes Return event, but you don't see him. Like, his storyline doesn't specifically, he doesn't get a comic book again, he doesn't get an ongoing series or a mini-series. He appears in like 3 or 4 issues of Marvel Team Up, and it's him having to cope with the fact that, like, oh, I was reborn in a pocket dimension, and now I'm back on Earth. I've been gone for a long time. My cousin's ruling Atlantis. I don't breathe water anymore for some reason. What is going on? And I've looked at getting these issues before as kind of a I don't know, I guess like an epilogue to my Namor collection. And I ultimately have it just because they're not gonna be very good, and they don't tie into anything else other than show you what happened to Namor when he came back to the Marvel Universe. But for $1, yeah, I'll buy that. So I got one of those issues where he teams up with Captain America. I believe there's an issue before and one issue after that in theory I'll have to hunt down. I also got 10 issues of Alpha Flight, which I've been working on collecting. Alpha Flight is the one piece of X-Men, one of two pieces of X-Men history left for me to get. I got almost all of the 40s, which was exciting. I pretty much have Alpha Flight 1 through, I believe it's 33. I'm missing 34, and then now I have 35 through almost 49. So about a third of the way. I'm about a third of the way through Alpha Flight. Oh, that's disgusting to say. But it's exciting, because that's a lot of comics I've never read before. And then I got 7 issues of Cyberforce. Cyberforce was a early Image title, conceived and drawn by Mark Silvestri, running off of his X-Men fame. I've never read these comics before, but a couple years ago I put together a Wildcats collection, and I had a good time with it. It's not a very good comic, but I enjoyed reading them, and I really liked seeing Jim Lee's artwork in the early 90s. I've also put together a Gen 13 collection, which is nowhere close to being complete. Gen 13 is apparently one of those books that, like, people like to have, because it's hard to find, or it's hard to find for a reasonable price. But yeah, when they had the initial 4-issue Cyberforce miniseries, and then it got greenlit into an ongoing series, and it rebooted, and you got like issues 1 through, I think my research showed it ran for 35 issues as well. I don't think I'm going to put together a full collection of this. I mostly just wanted a chance to look at Mark Silvestri's 90s era artwork again. There was a crossover between Wildcats and Cyberforce in my Wildcats collection, and I remember being like, wow, wow, Cyberforce is really just the X-Men, but legally distinct X-Men, isn't it? And I just kind of want the chance to confirm that. So yeah, this year's Free Comic Book Day was a lot of fun for me, and the thing that really got me the most was how jazzed and excited everybody was. Like, the comic book scene it always feels really isolating, even in a town like Orlando, where there's probably at least 8 local shops that you can get to, more if you want to drive a little bit further. And I'll fully admit, I'm not someone who wants to interact with a lot of people. I don't like big crowds. When we walked into Acme Comics out in Longwood, there were 40 people already in line. The line was like through the store. And then there were just more people everywhere, shopping and looking at toys and looking at comics and just doing stuff. And as much as that felt overwhelming to me personally, because I don't really like that many people crammed into one space anymore, it was great to see everybody coming out. It's always great to see dads and moms bringing their kids along and getting them some stuff, because you don't see that very often anymore in comic book stores. Kids don't buy comics, to be quite honest. So it's cool to see them coming in, maybe even buying toys or cards. A handful of cosplayers, not a lot. I did see a little kid dressed up as Luffy from One Piece, which was great. There was a One Piece Free Comic Book Day issue this year that I didn't get because I don't care. But again, cool to see that kind of thing happening. Yeah, it's nice to see everybody getting some comics and having a good time and looking for books. And it was just nice. So that was my Free Comic Book Day haul. How did you do? If you did it at all. If not, it's every year, May 4th, sorry. Every year on May 4th, if I remember correctly. Find your local store, get yourself some comics, buy something. I'm a big advocate of they're free books. And but the point of the free books is to get you in the shop to spend some money. You don't have to spend a lot of money, but please, buy something. I can only support the comic book industry so much by myself. But yeah, I had a lot of fun this year. That was my books. Let me know what you got down below and what you thought of it. And I will see you in the next episode of Breakdown. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.